The problem with Joe Biden's garbage people remark is that we're 6 days from the election. There are a class of people who will wait until Election Day or this week to vote, and they will be put off by a president of the United States referring to half of the nation as garbage. They just will. By virtue of most Americans being nice, they will. This is kind of reflected in the Tim Walz remarks. This is Tim Walz talking on CBS News about all the Nazi rhetoric that Democrats have used.
I want to put it into a larger context of your recent comment comparing the Sunday Trump rally to a Nazi rally. And I would also throw in there Obama's bitter clingers, guns and religion comment from a while back, the deplorable line from Hillary Clinton's campaign, and the way that Democrats are seen by some voters as disrespecting them. And I have to ask, does that undercut this closing message of unity from your campaign?
No, certainly not.
Except, despite his spin on that and cover for Joe Biden, not really. When you have the president of the United States of America calling people garbage. Now, I can't pull up all the audio feeds here. But here's what I can give you. So I've got all the major news networks pulled up on my screen. Let me tell you what I'm looking at. I got all the major news networks pulled up on my screen right now. On CNN, they're talking about the danger of putting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of health care if Trump gets elected. On Fox Business, they're talking about immigration and Kamala Harris. On MSNBC, they're talking about how bad Donald Trump is. On Newsmax, they're talking about Biden's remarks. On CNBC, they're talking about parental lack of confidence in teaching kids about finance. On Bloomberg News, they're talking about Joe Biden's comments. On C-SPAN, they're talking about Joe Biden's comments. Nobody's talking about Kamala Harris's closing remarks. More national news networks are talking about Joe Biden calling Trump supporters garbage than are talking about her closing arguments last night. I bet you didn't watch the speech. One, I bet you didn't care to watch the speech. And two, I bet it completely overshadowed the speech for you as well. The only major news network to give substantive coverage to today, of course, is MSNBC, and they're playing to the crowd. MSNBC is playing to the base. Now, what was so interesting about it is how it happened. This is Donald Trump on stage last night at his rally being interrupted by Marco Rubio.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I have breaking news for you, Mr. President. You may not have heard this. Just moments ago, Joe Biden stated that our supporters are garbage. Are garbage. He's talking about the Border Patrol. He's talking about nurses. He's talking about teachers. He's talking about everyday Americans who love their country and want to dream big again and support you, Mr. President. And I hope their campaign is about to apologize for what Joe Biden just said. We are not garbage. We are patriots who love America. And thank you for running, Mr. President.
Listen, so that was the buzz. We're 6 days from the election and Joe Biden opened his mouth. This, by the way, this is why Kamala Harris doesn't want Joe Biden on the campaign trail. Joe Biden was asked yesterday about being on the campaign trail. Don't have the video or the audio from it. He was asked by a print reporter who wrote about it, and Biden says, I've left my schedule open. They haven't asked. Poor doddering old fool that he is. They don't want him on the campaign trail. Now Harris is going to be taken off her message in order to respond to Biden. Now, this is part of her speech last night. She was on the mall with the White House as her backdrop. Remember all the people who got upset with Donald Trump during COVID having the White House as his backdrop. They're perfectly fine with Kamala Harris doing it. By the way, I don't know that one of your closing arguments being amnesty is probably the best thing when people are worried about the border, but that's what she wanted to do last night, and we're not even talking about that Kamala Harris essentially came out for amnesty. Last night in her speech, instead, we're talking about Biden calling Trump supporters garbage. There are 6 days. Let me explain to you what you do in your 6 days. Starting this past Sunday, you'll have gotten all of the data from all the states that make it available, and almost every state does. The lists of the people who have voted early. The list of people who've already registered to vote. And what you'll do by state and then by county and then down to precinct level is you'll look and see who among our supporters have already voted and who haven't. And if you're not on the list, they're going to find you. They're going to knock on your door. They're going to call you. They're going to say, don't forget to vote. You can vote this week. If not, don't forget Election Day. Go vote. And then what they're going to do is they're going to look at all the people who haven't voted early. And they're going to look at the ones who are low propensity voters. They vote in general elections. They don't vote in primaries. They vote in presidential elections. They don't vote in midterms. They're going to see which of these people hasn't voted, but voted in the 2020 election or the 2016 election. And the Democrats are going to start working those people, saying, you don't want to vote for Donald Trump. He's a Nazi. You don't want to vote for Donald Trump. Did you know what he said about Puerto Rico? And the Republicans are going to be finding the same voters and saying, Joe Biden called Trump supporters garbage. Are you going to let that stand? Are you going to tolerate a president of the United States calling you garbage? Go vote for Trump. Or they're going to say, did you know Kamala Harris wants amnesty? You may not like Trump, but you don't have to vote for her. You can stay home. The parties are right now finding their voters who haven't voted to get them to the polls and finding the voters they're afraid will go vote and trying to convince them not to. And that's something you've got to be able to process in your mind. It is not unconstitutional. It is not illegal to convince a voter not to go vote. And if you're worried about a voter, you've got a Hispanic man in his 40s who works a blue-collar job. And the last time he showed up to vote was 2016. You, if you're a Democrat, do not want that man voting. You do not want him voting. You want to find him and you want to tell him that Donald Trump calls Puerto Ricans garbage people. You want to tell him that. If you're a Republican, you want that man to vote, and you go find him and say Joe Biden called Trump supporters garbage. Half of Americans, Joe Biden, the president, called garbage. Don't you want to respond to that? Shouldn't you go vote against that? That's what they're doing. They're trying to stop people from voting now. They're trying to get their base and stop everybody else from voting. If you are an undecided voter right now and you're thinking of going to vote, neither party wants you to go vote at this point because you're the wild card. And they think things are pretty predictable. In fact, the trend lines for Donald Trump right now are actually pretty good. Here's Harry Enten. Harry Enten talking about the voter registration process in the country right now, that things actually, according to Enten, look pretty good.
Just 28% of Americans, voters, think the country is going in the right direction, is on the right track. And I want you to put that into a historical perspective for you. Okay, what's the average percentage of the public that thinks that the country is on the right track when the incumbent party loses? It's 25%. That 25% looks an awful bit like that 28% up there. It doesn't look anything like this 42% doesn't look anything like this 28%. So the bottom line is, very few Americans think the country is on the right track at this particular point. It tracks much more with when the incumbent party loses than with it wins. In fact, I went back through history. There isn't a single time in which 28% of the American public thinks the country is going on the right track in which the incumbent party actually won. They always lose when just 28% of the country believes that the country is on the right track.
It is you are swimming upstream.
Not only that, but you also have the President of the United States making his garbage people remark. That's a way to motivate people to go vote and not Democrat.